6 months later, Tyler Henderson was rejected by every Ivy League school after the truth about his academic fraud came out. My adoptive parents took me in claiming they wanted to give me a stable home, but what they really wanted was someone to do their son's homework and take his beatings. The scalded skin on my hand and torn journal pages told me I was just a brain to them. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. I was 12 when Beatrice and Gregory Henderson adopted me. They promised a fresh start, a warm home and love, but on my first week, I met Tyler same age, smug, and territorial. He shoved me for getting an A in English when I limped past dinner. They didn't ask why. He's adjusting, they said, smiling. Tyler got a cookie. I got silence. That was the first time I felt invisible in my so-called new family. Tyler started small, blaming me for spilled milk, hiding my homework. They believed him every time. He's sensitive, Beatrice whispered, while handing him my birthday gift. Gregory once called me his insurance policy during a barbecue. No one laughed. I began to track Tyler's lies in a hidden notebook, every bruise, every chore he forced on me. That notebook, a gift from my birth mom, became the only place I still existed on my own terms. By 8th grade, I was writing Tyler's essays, solving his math problems, even forging his emails to teachers. One night I refused. He slammed my head into the wall. Beatrice found me dizzy, bleeding, but only asked if Tyler's project was done. The next day, she brought me a new laptop. For efficiency, she smiled. My teacher praised Tyler's brilliance in front of me. My fingers trembled every time I typed under his name. Nobody saw me. Gregory began introducing me as Tyler's academic twin at fundraisers. I smiled, hiding bruised ribs under my dress shirt. At school, a counselor asked about my frequent accidents. I lied. If I told the truth, I'd be back in foster care or worse. Miss Garcia, my English teacher, once caught a glimpse of my real writing. She called it raw brilliant. Tyler later burned the notebook where I practiced. That was the night I stopped dreaming aloud. I tried reporting the abuse anonymously to child services. A week later, Beatrice showed up with cake, smiling too wide. That night, my locked drawer was broken, pages of my journal torn and flushed. You have nothing to hide now, Tyler whispered. Mrs. Patterson, the counselor, told me to be grateful. They donated to the school library. She said I stopped writing altogether. My truth wasn't just silenced, it was erased, piece by manipulated piece. Tyler's college prep began early. I took his sets under his name twice. When he scored high, he punched my arm playfully. You're the best investment ever. Gregory joked to Sarah, Tyler's ex, once saw us leaving tutoring. She raised an eyebrow, weird, she murmured, but she didn't press. I hoped someone would connect the dots. Instead, I became a ghost, smart, silent, and invisible in every photo, every achievement wall. My identity was buried beneath Tyler's lies. I finally snapped during a college admissions interview. Tyler forced me to attend as him. The panel asked about a robotics project, my project. I answered too passionately. One interviewer narrowed her eyes. You seem invested. That night, Tyler threw my laptop across the room. Gregory pinned me against the wall. Stay in your lane, he hissed. That was when I decided I'd document everything. If they saw me as a tool, I'd become their undoing. I began copying every email, test, assignment I did for Tyler. I recorded audio of his rants, Gregory's threats, even Beatrice's corrections to my bruises. I mailed Sarah a sample essay proof I was the real author. At school, I left anonymous tips in Miss Garcia's mailbox. Marcus, a classmate, noticed my limps and offered rides. He became my safe point. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building a case, and for once, I had allies. Sarah confronted Tyler one afternoon, pretending curiosity about his essay. He fumbled, couldn't explain basic points. She laughed coldly. Funny, Gerbert said the opposite. Tyler turned pale. That night, I found my mattress slashed. Gregory blamed bedbugs. Marcus gave me a burner phone, whispered, you're not alone. My evidence grew daily. I didn't sleep much, but every upload felt like reclaiming breath. Their walls were cracking. And for the first time, I stopped apologizing for existing. The night before Tyler's final college interview, Beatrice begged me to write a speech. I refused. She slapped me hard. Gregory grabbed a belt, but Tyler stopped him. We need him, he said. I stared at them, all my abusers, my captors, and whispered, not anymore. I ran. Marcus was waiting outside. We sped off, us in my pocket, my torn notebook in hand. My lungs burned, but my spine straightened. I wasn't theirs anymore. I was done. At Marcus' house, his mother called child services. They listened. Sarah sent screenshots. Catherine Klein, her sister, and an education advocate, got involved. Miss Garcia confirmed handwriting samples. I finally recorded my own name reading my work. Tyler tried messaging threats. I saved them all. Mrs. Patterson apologized. I should have seen it. My voice trembled but didn't crack as I said. I was screaming silently. For once, someone heard. And this time, they couldn't ignore me. 2 investigators showed up at the Henderson house. Tyler denied everything. Beatrice cried. Gregory yelled, but the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, bruises, recordings, essay drafts. They tried blaming stress, adoption struggles, even me. But the professionals weren't swayed. James Holloway, a former foster kid from their past, emailed from out of state. I have scars too, he wrote. With him, my truth became theirs too. The house of silence they built collapsed under the weight of our voices. Gregory hired a lawyer to accuse me of plagiarism and theft. He claimed I hacked Tyler's accounts to ruin his future. The media ran with it. Foster teen frames model family. My stomach churned seeing my face online, labeled a manipulator. Catherine pushed back hard. She released documents proving I never owned a laptop until they gave me one pre-installed with tracking. Marcus's dad threatened defamation lawsuits. The court ordered an emergency review. The lie was fighting back. James flew in unannounced and stood beside me at the review hearing. Same house, same bruises, he said, rolling up his sleeve. The judge's face hardened. Beatrice whispered prayers under her breath. Tyler refused to look up. Sarah testified next, reading Tyler's texts aloud. We just need his brain. He'll shut up. The room froze. That line shattered their mask. What they called family, the court now called exploitation. For the first time, truth thundered louder. Beatrice tried one last tactic, claiming I'd confessed to lying, presenting a fake letter, supposedly signed by me. But Catherine recognized the signature was traced from old school forms. Handwriting analysis confirmed it. Miss Garcia cried when she saw it. They used your own school records to silence you, she whispered. I felt a strange calm. Every lie they told was now a blade turned against them. The courtroom echoed with the truth they once buried. 6 months later, Tyler Henderson was blacklisted from every top-tier college after his fraud unraveled. My adoptive parents claimed they wanted a son, but what they wanted was a boy smart enough to fix their real son's failures. I thought I'd found a family. Instead, I was their tool. The blood on my homework and the bruises hidden beneath sleeves said it all. I was 12 when Beatrice and Gregory Henderson adopted me. At first, everything was clean clothes, warm dinners, and promises of love. Then I met Tyler. On the second week, he threw my notebook across the room for outscoring him in math. Beatrice smiled and told me to be patient. Tyler had pressure. That night, I copied his homework while he watched TV. My hand trembled, but I obeyed. Family, they said, meant sacrifice. Week 3, Tyler punched me in the ribs after I corrected his essay. I curled on the floor, gasping. Beatrice walked in, saw us, and handed him an ice pack for his hand. He's fragile, she whispered to me. Gregory never looked up from the newspaper. My school files were updated. Tyler's name on my work. At night, I traced bruises under my shirt, wondering when it stopped being a home and became a contract. By 8th grade, I was writing Tyler's college essays. He called me his ghostwriter like it was a joke. One night he shoved me down the stairs. I limped into school with a fake story about slipping. Mrs. Patterson asked nothing. My journal, my only truth, was shredded by Tyler when he found it. I stayed quiet. Calculating escape routes in my head, pain was constant, but silence was survival. Tyler failed a chemistry test he's taken alone, and Gregory snapped at me for not tutoring him better. If he fails, we all do, he hissed. I tried to record their threats, but Tyler found the device and stomped it underfoot. Miss Garcia asked if something was wrong after I turned in a blank assignment. I shook my head. Who would believe me? The Hendersons ran donation drives. I was just a kid. Sarah Klein, Tyler's ex, messaged me after seeing a group project post when I wrote under his name. That's your handwriting, she said. I deleted the chat immediately. Tyler monitored everything. That night he cornered me in the garage. Furious, I'd flirted with a traitor. He slammed my head against the door. I didn't cry, just cleaned the blood, then erased the chat logs. One mistake meant weeks of punishment. Marcus Dalton, my lab partner, noticed I winced whenever Tyler passed by. He scare you, he asked. I shrugged. But later, I slipped him a flash drive with essays labeled by initials, guess T for me, TH for Tyler. He returned it, saying nothing, but he looked different, more alert. That night, Tyler found a backup in my sock drawer. He erased it all and ripped my only hoodie. I cried into my pillow, fists clenched. Marcus invited me over to study. Instead, I met Sarah and her sister Catherine, who'd been researching the Hendersons. Catherine showed me Kespius Report's old buried complaints. You're not the first, she said. My hands shook. We spent 2 nights compiling emails, comparing writing samples and scanning bruises. I wrote my story and backed it up to the cloud. When Marcus' dad offered to help with legal counsel, I said yes. For the first time, I felt seen. At Sunday dinner, I asked Tyler what pa he had a 4-3. Obviously, he bragged. I pulled out a flash drive and played a recording his tantrum about not understanding his own essay. Beatrice dropped her fork. Gregory demanded I stop. This is a family matter, he growled. But Marcus had joined us. Phone recording everything. Tyler lunged, trying to grab the phone. Beatrice slapped me. I didn't flinch. I'm not your puppet, I whispered. The silence afterward was thunderous. The next day, school buzzed as someone leaked the recording. Miss Garcia stopped me in the hallway, eyes glassy. I'm sorry, she said. We failed you. Tyler didn't come to class. Beatrice sent an email accusing me of fraud and mental instability, but Marcus' father filed for temporary guardianship. Citing abuse, the principal scheduled a hearing. In the quiet that followed, I sat on my bed, rereading my college essay signed with my name, not Tyler's. It felt like breathing again. At the school board hearing, Catherine presented evidence, voice recordings, essay comparisons, medical records. Beatrice tried to interrupt but was silenced. Tyler hid behind sunglasses. Jaw tight, I sat beside Marcus, trembling. The superintendent asked if I wanted to say anything. I stood, voice raw. I was never their son. I was their insurance policy. Gasps echoed. Gregory muttered legal threats, but the board voted for an investigation. I walked out taller than I'd ever felt before. 2 days later, Beatrice filed charges accusing me of theft and assault, but the police found inconsistencies. Meanwhile, James Holloway, another foster child from years ago, surfaced. He had journals, photos, x-rays. They did the same to me, he said on video. Catherine released it online. It spread fast. Suddenly, reporters camped outside the Hendersons' house. Tyler tried to delete everything, but copies existed everywhere, their perfect image cracked like porcelain. Marcus' dad filed an emergency injunction. That night, Kespius arrived with officers and Sarah in tow. Tyler screamed it was a setup, but they had court orders. Beatrice clutched family portraits, as if they could erase the bruises. I packed a single backpack. Gregory tried to stop me until he saw the restraining order. You'll regret this, he hissed. No, I said. You will. I walked into Marcus' car, door closing like a chapter ending. Media outlets picked up the story. Foster fraud scandal trended. Anonymous tips flooded in. 2 more ex-foster children spoke up. Miss Garcia helped compile everything into a public report. Marcus and I built a website, Truth Against Tyler worked. Donations poured in. A scholarship fund was proposed in my name. Tyler tried suing us for defamation. It was dismissed. Judges cited evidence, testimony, and his revoked transcripts. Truth, it turned out, was louder than legacy. A school board member leaked documents proving Beatrice had manipulated teachers, forged signatures. Miss Garcia resigned in protest, but joined the advocacy board Marcus' dad was forming. Catherine scheduled a town hall. Tyler's grandparents attended. During the QA, they apologized publicly. We didn't know what they said, but we believe you now. I stood in the back stunned. For years, I begged someone to see. Now strangers were fighting for me louder than family ever had. Tyler was expelled. Beatrice and Gregory were investigated for financial fraud, academic dishonesty, and abuse. Their assets were frozen. Sarah testified before the district committee, citing forged FAFSA forms and my identity misuse. James' scars became evidence. The judge ordered restitution. I sat beside Marcus during the hearing. gripping his sleeve. You made it, he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. For once, justice didn't come late. It came loud and in public. Catherine helped me file my own college applications. Miss Garcia wrote the recommendation letters. We submitted them under my real name, Gerbert Callahan. The same night, Tyler was arrested for witness intimidation. I watched him get cuffed on the evening news. The footage went viral. My inbox flooded with support students. Teachers, strangers. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was reclaiming space they'd tried to erase. My name wasn't just on documents, it was on the news, the narrative, the truth. Sarah invited me to speak at her college survivor symposium. I stood on stage, hands trembling. Then opened my journal, the one Tyler had once torn. This is my real voice, I said. I read a poem I wrote at 14. Hidden behind textbook margins. The room stood in silence, then applause. Catherine hugged me afterward. You didn't just survive, she said. You started something. That night, I slept 8 hours without fear for the first time. Marcus' family cleared out their guest room, new sheets, real curtains. I sat on the bed, unsure what to do with comfort. Olivia Patterson visited with KSBS this time to apologize. We're updating policy because of you, she said. We toured local colleges that week. I held admission letters in hand, stunned. For years, I was used, erased, replaced. Now I was chosen, not for someone else's image but for my own light finally shining. During a podcast interview, I was asked what freedom felt like. It's when no one checks your homework, I said. Laughter followed, but I meant it. Freedom was sleeping through the night without alarms, writing essays under my own name, opening mail addressed to me, not to Tyler. Miss Garcia texted, your story made our staff retrain. I stared at the message, tears falling. Change wasn't just happening to me, it was starting for me. A letter arrived, handwritten, from Tyler's grandparents. Inside was a photo of me from that awkward family picnic, smiling despite bruises. We failed you. It read, we see you now. I showed Marcus, unsure how to feel. That's something, he said. I tucked the letter in my journal. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was acknowledgement, and sometimes, that's louder than apology. The past couldn't be undone, but the silence no longer owned me. Catherine invited me to co-host a webinar on survivor advocacy. We discussed education fraud, grooming, and systemic failure. In the chat, someone wrote, thank you, Gerbert. You gave me courage. I froze for years. I had no voice. Now, strangers were borrowing mine to find theirs. Afterward, Marcus made celebratory pancakes. You're not just surviving, he said. You're building. I laughed, really laughed, the kind that shakes ribs but doesn't hurt. James and I met for coffee. Our scars like mirrored ghosts. They always picked boys who wouldn't fight back. He said. We sat in silence. No need to explain further. Before leaving, he handed me a dog-eared notebook. For your words only. I clutched it like armor. That night, I wrote freely, no aliases, no fear. Every sentence felt like reclaiming breath. Tyler had taken years. How every word was a piece of them I stole back. At my first therapy session, I hesitated. I don't know where to start, I said. The therapist smiled. You already did. We unpacked guilt, survival, and stolen identity. I cried not from pain, but release. I drew Tyler's face on a scrap of paper and tore it quietly. Piece by piece, symbolic maybe, but it felt good. Healing didn't come with fanfare. It came with silence I chose, not the one forced upon me. On a random Tuesday, a former teacher emailed. I'm sorry I ignored the signs. Attached was a scanned quiz, my handwriting under Tyler's name. You were always the brightest, she added. I didn't reply right away, but I printed it, folded it into my journal. Not to forgive, not yet, but to remember. The truth was no longer hidden in margins, it had center stage, and sometimes, even delayed recognition still cracks a locked door open. Marcus handed me a set of keys. Basement's yours if you want to write there, he said. I stepped inside, dusty couch, old desk piece. I set up a lamp, pinned photos of people who believed me. That night, I started a manuscript. Gostrid and no more. It wasn't polished, but it was mine. Every keystroke echoed like a heartbeat. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a voice typed, loud, and undeniably my own. My college acceptance letter came printed in bold, full scholarship. I stared at it, then reread it. Not Tyler's name, mine. I took it to the backyard and read it aloud. Marcus cheered. Catherine cried. Miss Garcia sent confetti emojis. I pinned it to my wall next to rejection letters addressed to Mr. Henderson. This one was different, not earned through lies or stolen identity. It was mine, and for once, that was enough. Catherine gave me a bracelet engraved with my name, and the date I left the Hendersons, Freedom Day, she smiled. I wore it to my graduation ceremony. As my name was called, the auditorium erupted. No aliases, no secrets. Just Gerbert Callahan, survivor, scholar, advocate. I spotted Sarah, Marcus, James all standing. I raised my fist, then lowered it to clutch the bracelet. For the first time, I walked forward without looking back. In Marcus' house, peace had a sound, quiet laughter. Doors that didn't slam, footsteps without dread. I rearranged my room weekly, just because I could. The journal James gave me filled page after page. I even sent copies to Catherine, who archived them for a survivor library. I wasn't healing in isolation. I was part of a movement. Every sentence written under my own name felt like reclaiming air stolen for too long. I visited the school once, the hallway where Tyler shoved me, the corner where I hid bruises. I didn't flinch this time. Miss Garcia walked beside me, her hand on my shoulder. You changed this place, she said. I smiled, not in triumph, but in quiet resilience. Pain left echoes, but so did survival. I left a note in the counselor's office, believe them the first time. It stayed pinned up for weeks. Late one night, I reread my old essays, Gostrid for Tyler. I didn't burn them. I highlighted parts that were mine, circled the stolen words, then I wrote my own beside them. You tried to erase me, I scrawled, but I rewrote everything. That page now hangs over my desk. Not as bitterness, but as proof. My story didn't begin with them. It began the moment I stopped writing for someone else. Beatrice and Gregory faced charges: fraud, abuse, academic misconduct. They pled guilty to avoid trial. Tyler, stripped of offers and reputation, moved states under supervision. My testimony led to stricter foster checks in the district. I wasn't just a case number. I was the reason policies changed. I stood before cameras, not as a victim but as proof that silence doesn't mean consent. Justice wasn't perfect, but it finally showed up. At orientation, I sat in a circle of new students. No fake names, no borrowed identity, just Gerbert. I shared part of my story. A girl beside me whispered, "You're the reason I applied." I smiled, not out of pride, but connection. My voice had traveled, my pain turned platform. I wasn't alone anymore, and in helping others stand, I realized I had never truly fallen. I had always been rising. On campus bulletin boards, someone pinned a flyer, "Truth Against Tyler Annual Scholarship Open." My name was listed under the founder's note. I stared at it, stunned. I'd turned trauma into aid, secrecy into spotlight. Marcus hugged me, beaming, "This is just your beginning." He was right. They used to own my story. Now I wrote the ending, and more importantly, every beginning to come. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.